Welcome to Business Talk, presented in collaboration with the University of Rio Grande and the Ohio State University South Centers, from the heart of southeastern Ohio at the University of Rio Grande TV studio. Our goals are simple: promote the University of Rio Grande and the Ohio State University South Centers, as well as advocate local small business and their support organizations. More importantly, promote southeastern Ohio as a wonderful place to live, explore, and learn. There are many different ways you can find us. The University of Rio Grande Cable Access Channel 17, live online at blogtalkradio.com, and on YouTube if you are unable to catch our show live. Introducing our co-hosts, Jason Winters, Mike Thompson, Patrick Dengel. Thank you for tuning in. We hope you enjoy the show.
Good afternoon, this is Peter Masters. I'm an MBA student here at the University of Rio Grande, and behind the camera today we have Jason Watson, a business communications major, also here at the University of Rio Grande. Today on Business Talk, it is my pleasure to introduce our distinguished guest, Dr. Barbara Gellman-Danley, President of the University of Rio Grande and Rio Grande Community College. Dr. Danley has a PhD in communication from the University of Oklahoma. Some of the topics that Dr. Danley will discuss with us today are the continued growth of the University of Rio Grande and Rio Grande Community College enrollment, how Rio is firmly committed to serving its adult learners, and how Rio remains a key to the region's economic development. And although we are still early in a decade of dreams, Rio is well on its way to accomplishing the goals of the strategic plan. Welcome, Dr. Danley, and we thank you today for taking the time to join us.
Well, thank you very much. It's terrific to be here today, and as Chief Cheerleader for the University of Rio Grande and Rio Grande Community College, let me talk a little bit about a couple of things we're doing, and then let's have a great conversation. We are the only institution in the country that is a combination of a public community college and a private university. That may sound common to others, but it's not. We're the only one, and we have a lot of national attention and people who are watching us. The advantage of that for the people in the state of Ohio is any student in the state of Ohio enters with the community college tuition rate, which is a heck of a deal, and then moves on to the university's private rate, which is extremely competitive with other private institutions. So that's one of the really unique things about the university. We have, and the community college, and we have a lot of focus now that we're working with adult learners and special programs. Let's talk today a little bit about the economic development. We're one of the largest employers in the region. And finally, we do have a really awesome strategic plan. So I'm here to interact with the rest of you. Let me know what you want to talk about.
Well, let's start with enrollment. I know that community colleges around the state are traditionally going down at this point, but the university here has gone up, right?
Right. And in the fall, we do comparative data. We found that there were only 2 community colleges in the state that increased in enrollment. And actually, I believe there was only 1 in the spring, and we were in both the 2 and then the 1.
Fantastic.
I think part of it, to be fair, is that a lot of the community colleges had a huge growth when the economy failed. And we went into a recession period, and people rushed back. As the economy is slightly picking up in those other areas, some of their enrollment plummeted significantly. However, we have a steady growth because we're trying to respond to our learners and give them programs that match the needs of today's working students and the workforce in general. So that's going to give us a solid enrollment for the future.
I know in terms of soccer recruitment, we find the tuition rate very successful in recruiting successful players to the program. I was looking at the actual programs we offer. Which programs lately have been the ones which have seen the most growth?
Well, let me start by saying that we offer a lot of programs for an institution our size. We're over 2,400 students at this point, our highest enrollment since the early 2000s. And I would say nursing is a very large program. Education and business are large programs, but we have specialty programs. And the soccer players, with their practice and with their great success, may not have a perfect match for some of the programs I'm about to mention, but let me mention them. We have a fine woodworking program that is nationally known. Our students do not do carpentry, they do fine woodworking. It's an art. And they've won contests. They've won contests where one of their desks sold for nearly $19,000. Their talent there is enormous, and for those students who are able to work in that industry. We try to use local wood, etc. So it's a very exciting program. We have very strong allied health programs. In nursing, our pass rate's high, above the national average. Radiological technology, we call that rad tech. All kinds of things in that particular, in the allied health. We have industrial technology programs that are strong. A couple new programs I'd like to talk about, but let me first say the uniqueness about our combination is we have the liberal arts. There are a lot of national studies that show students who can communicate, who can speak well, who can write well, who can think critically are going to succeed a lot better, whether they go back to their homeland of Wales or England or it's soccer players or any other learner. You have to be able to communicate. So we don't just give people training, we give them an education. We have a couple new programs that we started last fall, one in hospitality management with the Bob Evans Farm Corporation. We can certainly talk about that. And another one that is really cool, it's with a local group, BTS for Battlefield Telecommunications. They're actually not local. Originally they're in Baltimore, but the person who runs it is a homegrown Gallipolis individual. And he wanted to come back and give back to Ohio and give back to Gallipolis. And that's software engineering. We have internships with both those programs. The latter one has another partnership, they call it Cross Checks, and that deals with prescription drug abuse. So for example, there's a lot of that happens, not just in southeastern Ohio, but across the country and probably internationally. And the idea is you can go to a drugstore and 5 different drugstores and 5 different doctors and get far too many medications that are either good for you or you're selling them. And this particular software will prevent that from happening as far as cross-checking across the industry so that individuals cannot abuse drugs. We were invited to do the training for software engineering for these programs. They were housed on our campus in combination with Holzer Hospital. So I'll pause for a moment because I'm pretty excited about all these initiatives.
Well, you have also a really good working relationship with a number of banks, financial institutions, the Holzer Medical Center, some of the educational programs that surround our area, etc. And you've been, I think, very instrumental in working with a number of the educational programs throughout Ohio.
Well, I actually had an opportunity before I was here as president. I was the vice chancellor at the state regents in Ohio over program approval and academic affairs. So I had very good insight as to what every one of the 23 community colleges were offering, the 50 private universities, the 14 state institutions. So that gave me exposure to programs that are working well, not working well, etc., where you could see a spark in somebody's eye, a student, somebody, their life made a difference at one of our institutions. So coming here, it's always a little sensitive to say, which programs should we talk about, because we've got so many that are outstanding. So you've got to be careful when you're thanking someone for an award that you don't leave out your spouse, for example. So I want to make sure I don't get in trouble over that. So you're all wonderful, but I'd like to point out that, I had some insight. And if I were to give a couple principles of operation for economic development and education, you have to listen to the marketplace. There are a lot of jobs out there, but too many institutions are educating or training their students for positions that no longer exist. If you take the field of education, there was a time that there were spots for a lot of teachers in elementary. There may not be now. It may be middle school. It may be special ed. You have to be nimble and very willing to respond to the marketplace and figure out where you need to go. So, I was very fortunate to have that exposure, and I do know the leadership of every institution in the state. And you know what? You don't have to reinvent the wheel. The fact that we have a couple very high-profile programs now, we know other institutions would like to partner with us and offer some of those courses. And imitation is a high form of flattery, so we're more than willing to spread the good word and do what we can do well with others.
Do you think the size of the institution, being a smaller one, makes it more agile to start up new programs quicker or not?
I don't think there's any question. If he were even sitting here, since we're partnered with the Ohio State University Southern Center, South Centers, Gordon Gee would tell you that if you were asked in December to start a program the following fall, it wouldn't likely happen at an institution his size. There would be a lot of bureaucracy and approvals and things that would need to happen. And he is very supportive of what we're doing with hospitality management, even though Ohio State offers it, because we're in the home of Bob Evans. Honestly, I don't know where our property begins and theirs ends and vice versa. We have a close partnership with them. I wanted to help reignite that relationship now that they're out of Columbus, and it's such a strong partnership where our art students and our art department are doing artwork for their new facility, their new campus in New Albany. But I think the nimbleness is absolutely, and agile, as the term you use, is related to size, and it's also related to attitude. I'll be candid with you. There are a lot of institutions that would be wonderful and financially sound and never worrying about some of the things that all of us have to worry about in private higher ed in particular, that part of us. But I'll tell you what, it's not as much fun because it takes forever to get anything done. You have an idea here, you can use it. You can get it in place right away. Jason's been part of that.
Mm-hmm. I want to change the conversation just a little bit. We've talked about the changing environment of business and how some of those jobs have changed over the years. You gave the example of education. Well, the same can be true of students as well. The different demographics of our students, the age, can you speak to a little bit about that and how the learners are changing?
Yeah, you might be sorry you asked that because I serve on 2 national boards that deal with adult learners. But let me point out that I don't think most of our listeners will realize that this past fall, 2012, was the first year nationally that more adult learners were entering freshmen than the traditional 18 to 22-year-old.
Is that why the term has changed?
Well, the term as far as calling them adult...
Non-traditional?
Oh, that's a good point. We don't call them non-traditional. The American Council on Education put out a wonderful thought piece. I was at that meeting, was introduced because I'm fortunate I chair their Commission on Lifelong Learning. And that piece used the term post-traditional learner. In other words, let's say 18 to 22 years old is post-traditional, 25 and older is the adult. I don't know what you do the 3 years in between, but those are the, you work, I guess. But those are the years that are referred to. But yes, that's if demographically, Census Bureau-wise, there are less children. You know, it used to be in the old days, families would have, 4 or 5 children. Families are having 2 or 1.5. Now you can't have 1.5, so we round it up. And the idea, there are moments as parents we wish they were 1.5, they'd be quieter. But the idea is that for the next 10 years and for a time, the baby boom is over and the baby boomers' children are grown up now and we're aging and there's more adults. And so you're going to have an absolute shift in the audience. And that's a really cool group. I love the 18 to 22-year-olds, but I also happen to really find adults stimulating learners because they bring something to the table. Mm-hmm. I was a traditional learner as an undergrad at Syracuse University. I had 50% in education, 50% of social life, as most students. Sometimes it tips in another direction. But when I went back, and my first master's, I did it right out of my undergraduate. But when I got my MBA, I was working at Cox Communications, Cox Cable in a large market, Oklahoma City. What I brought to the table then, I was only in my early 30s, but still, I was a grown-up. I had a family. I was working. You see the world differently.
And you have something that you can apply the knowledge to and maybe enlighten some other people in the classroom.
That's right, exactly. And the idea is that our students here at Rio Grande, they're very astute. And if a faculty member, and it's not how our faculty member operates, but if you were traditional and you were 1 page ahead of the student, that's not going to work. I mean, when we mention working with banks, if we were doing training for Ohio Valley Bank, we've got bankers in the room and we're teaching finance, we darn well better be prepared to relate that to the real world. Mm-hmm. So they become part of the learning experience for the other students, for sure.
Does the delivery method change? I mean, adults have different demands and different needs and requirements.
They are substantially different. I'm very pleased that we have a Commission on Lifelong Learning at the university and the community college at Rio Grande, and we recognize some of the things I'm about to say to you. You hit an area of expertise, so bear with me and I'll just shoot off some facts. 1, you have to be totally flexible. You have to have a safe environment. If you're coming at night and you have a lot of women who are coming by themselves, you have to make sure your parking lots are well lit, etc. You cannot offer your classes between 8:30 and 1 o'clock. You have to offer classes at night, and you have to make sure that those classes are in buildings that are easily accessible to individuals. You have to have support services. The other side of it is it's not always what we call in higher ed the edifice complex. Let's talk about what's going on with online learning. The biggest term in online learning right now, there are 2, massive online open course, MOOC, Stanford and MIT and Duke and wonderful institutions like that are offering courses that are very high quality. It is open source, which means you can take those courses. You're not going to get the college credit unless you go a step further, but you can turn in work, etc., and you will be able to get that for free. And we certainly can think at Rio Grande, would we ask some of our students to take some of those courses and then do the second term a flipped classroom, which is to say that you get the material downloaded to you this way in advance, and the faculty member really moves up to a scholarly, analytical, let's have a good discussion about it. So
It's
give you
more of a facilitator.
An expert. And so you have, and that's done at the K through 12 level with something called the Khan Academy, where a lot is being offered in math and science. And there's such an explosion of information available. There's not enough time to get this education, and we are going to get on board and be part of it.
I'm curious. In England,
Yes.
and of course Peter Masters is from England. How do you see the educational differences between?
The main educational differences, especially, are because in England, the national governing body, every subject is graded exactly the same, no matter what school you go to, no matter what establishment you're at. Your degree program is all centralised around the same information, and every person studying that degree sits the same exam at the end of the year. So the grade you come out with is a standardised national grade. Now in America, it's completely different in the fact that the teachers have a lot more interaction with you and input into your grade, because they see the amount of work you're putting in, the coursework, the work that you're turning in, and they know the person individually. Now in England, the examiners do not take into account if anyone has any special requirements that they need for the exam. They will grade the paper exactly the same for every person. So sometimes people may get a grade which they feel is not representative of their true ability.
Well, let me take that, Peter, to say England's a good example. In our television system here, we did entertainment first and then educational television. In England, the BBC started as educational, big focus on education. But there's a national movement, and I actually had my first job in the late 70s in this movement, which is just taking off, competency-based education. And the idea of competency-based is individuals move ahead at their own pace, which is to say that when you've mastered a competency, you then move on to the next skill set you're supposed to learn. It's pretty easy to see what that would be in a fine woodworking class. You have to learn how to use the tools so you don't cut your fingers off, and then you do this, and etc. In writing and in math, there's some, kinds of things you could do with that. However, in competency-based education, if you're an advanced learner, if there are other ways you can show the competency, you can move through that class in a faster way and get out in 3 years. So we're also looking at that at the university.
Barbara, I want to go back just for a moment to the adult learner. I'm sure there's many people on our cable access channel that are watching here locally, and they're thinking, I've been wanting to go back. I've been working all my life. I've been in management all my life, and I've got all this experience. Does any of that equate to college credit?
Oh, I'm very glad you mentioned it. There's something called credit for prior learning. There are other terms that previously were used for that. Let's take the hospitality management program. If you've been managing a Bob Evans restaurant for a number of years, you probably don't need Management 101, but we're not going to hand you that, sell you that. We're going to have you do a complex portfolio where we show you what you need to learn in that class, and you have to demonstrate you have that knowledge. That's a very big part of it, that we have to recognize that our adult learners have life experience. And let's talk about a very important audience, the military. We are very much focused. We're a military-friendly school, veteran-friendly school. We also have a commission on the military and the veterans. And the idea with that is if you've gone through the in-depth training and experience that you may have in the military, even if you're coming back at 24 years old, we would be very foolish not to find a way to identify that as part of your learning experience.
That's where I got my training in radio and TV, and not only did I have to show them that I could fix and produce things, but only under fire, which
Right.
not everybody gets.
No, absolutely. And we're likely to be hosting a regional meetings sometime in the future. There are going to be 8 in the country. We're looking into the possibility of counseling veterans as they come back, because there's a lot of variables that come into their lives. And as Peter was saying, you've got to take that into account. If you've just come back from Iraq, you're going to be in a different mindset than someone who just got out of high school. And if you don't tailor your educational experience to those learners, you're missing the boat. So I love being at a smaller institution. And my passion, I've spent 15 years before I came here in community colleges and 10 years in private higher ed, is on both. So I think it's, I'm having a blast.
As far as military friendly, what do you mean by that? What
Well,
does that
one,
include?
you have to do all the kinds of things we're talking about for the adult learners, but you also have to have counseling. And you have to recognize you could have post-traumatic stress syndrome. You could have all kinds of things that you bring back if you've been active military. So we've actually called our commission active military and the veterans. There's both. But the idea is that it's a different kind of individual, and it's often a very skilled, disciplined individual. So you want to recognize that discipline, and because you're likely to be able to push a little more.
One of the things that the University of Rio Grande does have is an international student base because of the sports, because of the educational programs, because of a number of different factors. And I've noticed, of course, Peter comes from England, but you have a variety of different countries that come to the University of Rio Grande.
Yeah, for anybody who would be on campus, if you drove through one of our entrances, we have two entrances that we both call main entrances, but it depends what time you were affiliated with the university. We have flags up from the different countries. So yes, we have a very international soccer team, but we also have a partnership with 3 combined universities in Wales. We have students at the Madog Center. We are one of the very few Welsh studies programs in the country. So when I first came to southeastern Ohio, I thought all the Evans were related. I didn't realize they're not all related. All the Davises were related, but you got to be careful, make sure you know who's related to whom. But yes, we do have we're diverse in a different way than most institutions are diverse. I'm from New York, so that's my diversity contribution to southeastern Ohio.
And it is interesting, many of the students from the United States come from different parts.
Yes, and we want that. I mean, we want people from the West Coast, the East Coast. When you go to college with that experience, whether you're a commuter student or a residential student, which we love the residential opportunities here, it's a beautiful campus, that you have that rich life where you suddenly put aside just what you knew and you get outside your own culture, and you're a much richer individual for your whole life for that. And friendships are made. I mean, I know that a lot of people visit the different countries and visit their friends after they graduate for years.
I know that some of our past co-hosts have come from Connecticut, Columbus, and that's one thing that I found with the universities. When you have an influx of so many different cultures, religions, people from different companies, boy, you talk about a fantastic learning experience.
It is a great learning experience, and I really would encourage students to live on campus. It's going to be a requirement a year from now for the first 2 years, but I would encourage that anyway, because the dorm experience, albeit not necessarily a palatial estate like we all would like in any dorm at any campus, you have such an opportunity to interact with the other students. And we say in the business world that what happens in the hallways is a lot more important than happens in the boardroom, because really you're cutting deals, you're learning, you're working things, you're getting to know people, and that's what happens in dorms. You create your own cultures, and anyone who's ever had a dorm experience had a very different college experience than those who did not, if you have that opportunity.
Yeah, it forces
for
you
the
to
younger students.
Yeah, it forces you to consider other ways of thinking.
Yes.
And it forces you, because you have to live with these people.
You have to listen to their music, you know, all those kinds of things. And, you know, life is about a compromise. So I've had 2 daughters and 2 sons, and my daughters are not as big compromisers as my sons. I think I'm making a gender statement that may be not fair, but the idea is my son's roommates were just totally different than them, and they didn't care. And before you knew it, there were 4 people living together, and the girls would, you know, get into their associations and have a good time. A dorm experience is there's nothing like it. It's wonderful.
And a couple of things that you do have is some very good fraternities, very good sororities. I know that Mike and Jason have, I know Mike is main advisor, and I know Jason does a number of things with them.
Yeah, we have a terrific Greek life here. What you won't see are the huge houses on one street that you might see at a large land grant institution, but the frats and the sororities, they are very active, and they're the nicest group of people. At the end of the year, one of our fraternities runs an event to thank the faculty and staff, and they cook for us, and we go out
Very
to a
nice
local
event.
winery. We didn't do that in college. I have to tell you, it's just gracious and terrific. And the difference in this institution, whether it's the athletes, I like to occasionally go on a bus with the athletes and go to an away game. I got stuck with the soccer players behind a traffic accident, and everyone was doing karaoke one time this year. It was a blast. And so, I mean, the bottom line is that you have this opportunity in a smaller institution to know everybody's name. And I often say we're like the TV show that used to be on Cheers. Everybody knows your name. And when you walk across the campus at a larger institution, you might have the most friendly president, administrators, and faculty on earth, but they're not going to know everybody's name. And we know, if we don't know the name, we certainly know the backstories. There's not getting away with much here. We know your parents, we know your relatives, and we have a good time. We're a family here, and a lot of people can say that other institutions, but I truly believe that's a differential for us.
We know if you didn't show up to class.
We
Yeah,
do
we
know,
recognize
and
that, yes.
and we there are rules that do not allow us to talk to parents, and they'll call and they'll ask things, and we say get your child to sign the FERPA, form.
Absolutely.
So because if they sign the FERPA, we'll be able to tell you everything. And we're pretty parental. When I see the kids smoking next to one of our buildings, say, oh, here she comes. Here comes Dr. Danley. She's going to tell us not to smoke. And I go over and give them my lecture on lung cancer and everything. And, that's part of campus living.
Okay, we've got a few minutes left. See, one of your talking points was the strategic plan.
Yes, we did I'm biased because I've done a lot of work in strategic planning in my life, but I think it's important you have a strong strategic plan. So when somebody comes to me and say, I want this, I need that, or we should do this, I have to have it within a strategic context. Where are we headed? So we did a strategic plan, Decade of Dreams, that covers 2011 to 2021, really focused on the first 5 years. We'll do a refresh for the next 5 after that. And it is such a homegrown plan because every department had an opportunity to look at national trends, state trends, local trends, and then we paused, an important part that many institutions and businesses do not do, we paused to say, so what? So we found all these things out, so what, before we jumped to recommendations. It began with the board and it ended with the Board of Trustees. We have 2 boards, one for each institution. They work collaboratively at a retreat, and that is our roadmap. We have a roadmap. We know where we're headed. And like any plan, it has to be dynamic enough to move with the times because who knew certain things were going to happen? And so you've got to be prepared for that.
Mm-hmm.
So what are some of the next steps in our plan?
Well, one of them was to do major renovations on campus. We've started with $3.5 million for our largest classroom building. We have a master plan in place. We will do a capital campaign to do some upgrades aligned with that. Program development, we talked about the workforce, reaching out to certain businesses. I just mentioned 2 examples. There are many more. And then we got into a situation in the plan where we got excited about the possibilities of program growth. If we have a strong program, what can you break off of that program to do something new? If you go back and look at that plan, those of you who want to go on the website, it's under Decade of Dreams. It's on the landing page. It's a dynamic landing page, so pause it. It'll cross at a moment on the bottom. There's a fake article. It's the magazine approach, a chronicle for higher ed, and says what will be in 5 years if we do this plan, and we've actually done a lot of it already.
I know there's a lot of buzz going on right now about the wireless that's going to happen here on campus. Do you want to speak about that?
Yeah, that's our latest initiative. It's being put in right now. There will be wireless across the entire campus, and that gives our students an opportunity to be, state of the art, the kinds of things that are needed, as well as some in-classroom things that were done. For example, for the education school, the School of Education has some wonderful smart classrooms and opportunities to teach the teacher ed candidates state-of-the-art technology so they can bring it back to their schools.
I'm sorry, go ahead, Pat.
Well, we're just about out of time, and I wanted to, on behalf of everyone, thank you for coming and sharing some of your thoughts, and we hope that maybe sometime soon you can come back and tell us more what's happening.
Well, I would love to do that. I would encourage all of our listeners to go to college. Rio Grande's a great place.
You have been listening to our special guest, Dr. Barbara Gellman-Danley. She has joined us today to share with us the University of Rio Grande and some of the things that have been happening here that's really exciting. We want to thank you for listening. I'm Jason.
I'm Peter.
I'm Patrick.
And I'm Mike. Thanks for watching.